Hello everyone, thanks for joining me. I'm Tyler Johnson, CTO of PrivOps. Let me start with a question. If you believe that the nuclear arms race was a defining challenge of the Cold War, do you believe the AI arms race is a defining challenge of the great power competition? Well, I certainly do. And since you're attending this presentation or listening to it online, I think it's a safe bet that first of all, you're interested in identity-based data access and what that has to do with the data fabric, but then also what that has to do with the AI arms race. So to answer your questions, I'm going to take you on a little journey. For the next 30 to 45 minutes, I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about myself. Then I'm going to give you my prediction for the pacing we need to achieve with data to support the exponential growth in AI technologies. And then I'm going to tell you about how an identity-based data fabric can be implemented to support that casing. I'm going to take you through a commercial case study where we implemented it, and then talk about a future DoD use case. So about me, I've got a bit of a history of innovation. For example, back in the early 2000s when Ken and Jeff were writing the Agile Manifesto, I was taking what I learned around Lean and Agile from automotive to HP, where I invented the test automation that HP still uses after 20 years to test their Unix supercomputer platform, the Superdome. And then later, after helping Rackspace double their cloud revenue with VMware to more than $500 million, I wrote the first data fabric patent all the way back in 2015. Then in 2019, we got our first cyber contract. And then in 2022, we were able to take the data fabric into full production. Before getting to the main talk, I want to acknowledge the fact that there is a tremendous amount of confusion around the term data fabric. Tech industry pundits like Gartner call data fabric an emerging data management design. Emerging? Well, I've already built it. SAFCN, at least at one point, defined the DAF data fabric in terms of architectures for integrating AI into DoD operations. But if you really think about it and you look at the Air Force Big Six data platforms as they actually exist, this definition on the slide might actually work better depending on who you're talking to. I'll give you another one. NetApp, I used to work at NetApp, great company, great people. They're a storage company. They define data fabric as software-defined management of on-premise and cloud storage. So if you think about it, lots of people have lots of different definitions for data fabric. Even though these definitions are all different, they seem to share a common thread though. They tell you something about the agenda of the definers. Gartner uses the term emerging because they want to be seen as thought leaders. DAF personnel want to show progress to leadership and to the American people and show that they're paying attention to AI. And then NetApp, of course, they just want to sell more storage. So if you want to know more about someone's agenda when they use the term data fabric, simply ask them to define it. Here's my definition of the data fabric. Since I've already built it, it's not a design or an architecture, it's the actual system. An assembly line for the mass production of data pipelines which integrate legacy and modern systems. Now that we're on the same page with respect to definitions, let's talk about pacing. In the process of preparing this talk, I came across this quote from the Secretary of the Air Force back in February. He's not just right about China, but this is true about data and AI as well. Let me tell you what I mean. Let's look at how generative AI has progressed in the last 5 years by comparing the number of connections in a biological brain to the number of parameters in the neural network of a large language model like ChatGPT. I know there's issues with this equivalence, but a lot of research have used it, and I think it's directionally accurate pretty much. Back in 2019, GPT-2 was launched with about 150 million parameters, making it almost as smart as a mouse. In just a year, now we're at 175 billion parameters and smart as a capybara. Last year, with the launch of GPT-4, we're at 1.7 trillion parameters, almost 2% the number of connections in a human brain. This is a prime example of exponential growth in technology, exactly like and in some ways driven by Moore's law for semiconductors. To support AI like we need to with data, we're going to have to start thinking about data in exponential terms as well. Here's a different look at the exponential growth in AI on a logarithmic scale. I did a little logistic regression to predict when GenAI parameter count reaches the number of connections in a human brain. Okay, well, there's obviously a lot of problems with this model, starting with the fact that there's only 3 data points. Opinions vary wildly, though, on when large language models will be as complex as human brains, but to me it seems pretty reasonable that it's probably going to happen in less time than it takes most people to pay off a car loan. The point is that Mr. Kindle's right. When it comes to AI and AI arms race, where data fabric's a critical enabler, we are indeed out of time. My graph was just a prediction. It could actually happen faster with all the investment. There might be some spooks in the room that know, but I have no idea what China is spending on AI. GenAI already has guardrails. Here's a ChatGPT 4 session I did to create a satirical image of Panera's bread IT outage a few weeks ago. What, no explosions allowed? But it depends on who's writing those rules, if they're good or bad. Our nation's leadership in AI and data is led by startups, not big companies or the government. That's why Microsoft's AI strategy revolves around OpenAI. We must leverage startups better, especially around strategy and architecture. Because of the exponential rate of change in AI, current DoD efforts to leverage startups like Cyber are like bringing a knife to a gunfight. It's way too hard for startups to work with the DoD. We can't say it's someone else's problem and then expect AFWorks to do all the heavy lifting. Everyone across the board in defense needs to be working to get new technologies from startups like mine in place to help with the AI arms race. Look, we all get that AI is crucial to winning the great power competition, but we also know that it's just part of a much more complex system. It's about the data. Data for training AI, automation, and situational awareness. But AI brains without connectivity aren't very useful, are they? If this is what AI growth looks like, this is what data pipeline growth needs to look like to match it. The rate we build data pipelines is the most important metric when it comes to data fabrics. Humans instinctively understand the importance of acceleration. It's why you get that adrenaline rush in a tight turn. Let's talk Vault. Here's a slide I lifted from an Air Force Vault presentation back in October. They doubled the number of pipelines to 120 in about a year. That's amazing, fantastic progress. But to become AI ready means they're going to have to accelerate rapidly. They'll have to create something like 240 data pipelines in the next year, 480 the year after that, and 960 the year after that. That's probably not even fast enough. The data lake warehouse architecture simply doesn't work for this. You can't scale the team fast enough without an assembly line process. You can see from this quote from Peter Thiel in his book 0 to 1 that he gets it. The big difference in what he's talking about versus me is he's talking about a 10x better outcome, and I'm talking about a 10x acceleration in the speed of delivering 10x outcomes. Like this graphic? Guess what? AI generated. So let's delve into what I mean about thinking differently by looking at a process involving AI. This is the ChatGPT session transcript I used for creating the Think Different graphic on the last slide. Here's my first prompt where I tell it what I want. Here's what it came up with. Okay, but let's try again. Attach silos in a file to represent data silos. Okay, cool. I like it. Now add text. Whoops, can't do that. Add it manually. No big deal, done. Here's the process I used. 10 minutes, pretty cool. Now let's look at how we did it before. Not nearly as much fun and takes exponentially longer. Good job, AI. Wait a minute. What if you use something else like crowdsourcing instead of AI? When OpenAI built ChatGPT Pro, a bunch of process stuff was optimized, like contracts, minimize cycle times for each step of the process to enable the AI. Technology-supported process optimization is actually what really makes AI useful. Here's another example, the Industrial Revolution. In Industry 2.0, Henry Ford used the assembly line to make cars exponentially cheaper and faster, eliminating 90% of its competitors in less than a decade. That's the kind of force multiplier we need to win the AI arms race. An assembly line optimizes the process of creating an output in addition to the output. The technologies used, by the way, at that time were not that innovative. It was how they were used to optimize the process that really mattered. So let's review. In Industry 2.0, assembly lines are used to build physical goods. In Industry 3.0, assembly lines are used to build software. And in Industry 4.0, assembly lines are used to build connectivity for intelligent cyber-physical systems. Now let's delve a little deeper into the data fabric. So why do we need granular data access? First, we need that fine-grained control over data to create a common operational picture across operators in different groups with different roles and security clearances, and this is the promise of CJAD-C2. Second, we can optimize the security utility trade-off for data access. We need it for automation, and fourth, it's a multiplier. We're eliminating data friction. In the current system, we control or govern access to data by limiting access at the network or application level. In the data fabric model, we use identity combined with the attributes of the data, also called metadata or data provenance, to control access at not just the network and application level, but down to individual pieces of data, rows and columns for structured, objects for unstructured. Imagine if this was how we controlled data, we would have minimized the damage caused by bad actors like Snowden, Manning, and Teixeira. So identity-based data access is just the first of many requirements for building a data fabric as an assembly line for building data pipelines. These aren't the technical requirements you're used to that focus on features, or the what requirements, I like to call it. These are process requirements, or the how you build the system requirements. I'll take you through 3 others, but I'm a little bit hesitant to share the whole list. I'm happy to share it privately, but I'd want to have a conversation first. So the next requirement I'll cover is composability. In my data fabric, we created what's essentially a programming language that defines the construction of data pipelines. For you folks familiar with DevOps and the tooling DAF software factories use, this is analogous to infrastructure as code. I call it integration as code. With it, you can manufacture data pipelines just by configuring pipeline components and rearranging them in different configurations in real time as the situation changes. There's also another term for integration as code, AI training data. Integration as code also sets the stage for using AI not just to process the data delivered in data pipelines, but to use AI to actually build and manage the data pipelines themselves. Speaking of modular components, modularity is the next requirement. It's not the same as standards. Standards aren't components, they're rules. And they don't work to increase interoperability and process efficiency because A, they've got to be enforced from the top down, which is incompatible with the DoD acquisition model. B, you're never going to get different services, let alone US partners, to agree to universal standards for data access. And C, they become obsolete over time. As new standards emerge, you end up with systems that don't talk to each other anyway. If someone tells you standards are the solution to getting systems to talk to each other, they're simply wrong. The data fabric is all about optimizing the process of building data pipelines, and humans are a huge piece of that process and always will be. Low code's required to scale the technical talent you have access to. So let's take a look at DEAMS, the DoD accounting platform everyone loves to hate. It's an integration nightmare. It's got over 250 point-to-point integrations, each of which has to be updated every time they update Oracle financials. It takes years. No wonder the data is always out of date. This absolutely affects warfighting capability, by the way. People hate it when they don't get paid because you can't keep the accounting systems up to date. Here's what DEAMS would look like with a data fabric. By creating an intermediary source of authoritative data, every time you update Oracle financials, you reduce the number of data pipelines to rework from 256 to 2. This seems like a no-brainer, right? Well, we met with the Deems team up at RightPath 3 years ago and pitched them on the data fabric approach. They were intrigued, but ironically, they told us they were too busy to do a pilot project with all the work they had to do refreshing all those data pipelines, and referred us to the company that held the Deems contract. Well, that didn't go over so well. Turns out people don't like making less money. Don't expect your private sector partners to re-architect a solution in a way that drains their bank account. Improved efficiency results in fewer billable hours and less money for the companies involved. There's two big exceptions here though. The first is startups. It's all upside for us, so there's no self-cannibalization problem. The second is actually incumbents, but only if they approach the problem by balancing lost billable hours with increasing the contract scope. Do more with the same dollars. So let's look at a commercial case study. Walt Carter, an Air Force veteran and CIO of a mortgage bank, wanted to empower citizen data scientists in his company so they could turn data into revenue and profit while simultaneously reducing cybersecurity and data compliance risk. Remember identity-based data access as a data fabric requirement? In the first phase, we had to fix the Active Directory mess he inherited. Instead of manually cleaning up the user data in AD, we just automated it. We talked to the ICAM team in H&I about this and will continue to do so. It will be a lot faster though if we create a single solution for both ICAM modernization and identity-based data access. I definitely encourage collaboration here. Then we moved all the integrations, accounting, consumer data, personnel data, contracts data, identity data, you name it, over to the data fabric. Then we implemented identity-based data access so every single employee and contractor has the data that they need to do their jobs while making sure that they don't see the data they shouldn't. The ABAC and ABAC Manager, by the way, stands for Attribute-Based Access Control, and this, as it turns out, is actually a sub-requirement for identity-based data access. If you've been following my line of reasoning, the results are as you would expect. 10x time reduction, 20x cost reduction, coding work eliminated, 10x acceleration and rate of change, data privacy by design, better security, and zero downtime after we launched. We also isolated changes in one system from other systems, and this increased both delivery speed and resilience. Here are two workflow examples on the identity project phase. We reduced the number of points of manual data entry to a single non-technical operator. So instead of having their technical folks operate as part of the process, they were freed up to work on building other stuff. Here's what granular data access looked like. Salespeople only see their customers' data, other roles only see the data they should see, and managers only see their team's data. The data views for each person is automatically updated as people move around the organization and as data attributes change. For example, contract expiration is a data attribute we use to automatically revoke access and improve security. The ability to automatically change data pipeline operation based on data attributes is one of the things I'm most excited about for the DoD. We can feed data attributes from sensors, intrusion detection systems, all kinds of monitoring and decision systems to do all sorts of amazing things, especially when you think about how quickly those systems will be improving with AI. Here's the bigger picture. It looks complicated, but because the data fabric is all about process optimization, things like low code and integration as code, it was actually pretty easy. It took us about 2 years to build it out, but that was because we had to build out a bunch of the tooling as we went along. If we did it now, by the way, we could probably do it start to finish in under 2 months. And now the vendor slide. The Matrix data fabric is highly modular. Low-level primitives are in Matrix core that sits on top of Kubernetes. On top of that is a UI-based low-code data pipeline builder, Matrix Workflows. And on top of both Matrix core and Matrix Workflows is Matrix applications. We call them skinny data apps because they reuse all the low-level components extensively. The result is we can support any integration style. Any interface method like APIs, SQL queries, FTP, carrier pigeon, it doesn't matter. Folks will say that if you want to integrate with a legacy system, You need to add APIs. Well, doing a bunch of refactoring to add APIs to legacy systems adds billable hours and software licensing revenue to contracts. It simply isn't necessary. And it also gets you out of the business of telling people in other organizations they have to go find funding to update their interfaces. Here's the software architecture we use for the commercial customer that demonstrates how Matrix Core, Matrix Workflows, and Matrix Applications work seamlessly together to implement identity-based data access. So where do we go from here? If you think about the data fabric as an assembly line for building data integrations, there's thousands of possible use cases across the DoD, so I'll just pick one example: cross-organizational data sharing. What if any group could share any data anytime to anyone? If there are 32 NATO member states and an average of 5 armed services per member, then we would need over 160 identity management integrations across tens of thousands of data pipelines to carry the data needed for human and AI operators. Only the data fabric as an assembly line for building data pipelines could possibly deal with the exponential scale of this use case. But imagine it. We could implement automated, trusted, federated data sharing across organizations in seconds based on scenarios the moment hostilities commence. Timing? We plan to launch the federated version of ABAC Manager within the next 2 months. Here are the key things from my talk I hope you'll want to walk away with. Since the AI arms race is a defining challenge of our generation, we really need to make sure data integration keeps pace with the exponential growth in AI. The focus must be on process over technologies and making sure we have the fine-grained control we need. We also need to re-architect the process of acquiring new technology to avoid asking people to work against their self-interest and support the critical role startups can play in winning the AI race. So what can you do? When we think about the great power competition in the AI arms race, China and Russia are competitors or adversaries, but not enemies unless hostilities break out. The real enemy is bureaucracy. So from the top to the bottom, I found that DoD personnel and personnel in the defense sector as well are far more mission-oriented than in the commercial sector. This is a huge advantage over China, whose military is dominated by corruption. If you believe, as I do, that we have to radically accelerate to win the AI arms race, then you really need to think about what you can do from your position. If you're on the DAF side, ask yourself if whatever it is you're working on will result in a process for faster delivery of outcomes. If not, find allies to help you change that from within the DoD, within the traditional defense sector, and with startups. You know, it's okay if the other tribe wins as long as it's our tribe. If you're on the private sector side, consider this. Better efficiency doesn't have to hurt your revenue. Consider working with your DoD partners to drive better efficiency in a way that's a win for everyone. It's possible to do this by expanding both the process improvements I've been talking about and by expanding the overall requirements of the contract. Experimentation works, by the way. So what can you do to facilitate that? And this goes for both DAF personnel and defense personnel. This goes back to collaboration. We need sponsors with use cases and budgets. If it's not you, chances are if you're listening to this talk, you know others that are. Here's how to reach us. Please reach out if you're curious and just want to chat, if you think we can work together, or if I can help you. Thank you.